Hello, and welcome to KSports Sunday. I'm Liam Mahler, and we have quite a show for you today, as we're going to talk about all the big stories in sports this week. Everything from the Patriots, which we'll actually have a special guest, Mike Reiss, calling in studio. We will also have a fantasy football segment for our YBA Fantasy League. Some baseball talk, including Bobby V and the recent Melky Cabrera news. And some Bruins stuff as well. Now, joining me today is Nick, Tom, David, and Alex. And another special thing we have coming up is it's actually Tom's birthday. Guys, let's say happy birthday to Tom here quickly. But we have
happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy Bruins play season. Happy birthday to you.
All right, guys, so we're calling Mike Reiss right here. Hello? Mike?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Mike. Hi, I'm Liam Mahler.
Hey.
So we have some questions for you about the Patriots. Is that okay?
That's great. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Can we start off with Jeff Demps?
Whatever you want to start off with, I'm good to go.
All right. So Jeff Demps obviously recently signed with the Patriots. What are your thoughts on how he'll do this season?
Well, I think it's interesting, that they signed him because what he is a blazing speed, and I think they were looking to improve their kickoff return unit. And Bill Belichick said on Thursday that they didn't really return any kickoffs well all last season, and even into this preseason, that they were disappointed in the results. So I think this is one guy that you can look at and say, he's going to add a lot of speed and maybe a dynamic presence to their kickoff return unit and possibly give them some better field position.
Hi, Mike. This is Nick. I was just wondering who you think has been the most impressive rookie so far.
Nick, I would say it has to be Chandler Jones, their top draft choice. He's a big guy. He's 6'6" and 260 pounds. And when they drafted him 21st overall out of Syracuse, a lot of people thought, he might need some more seasoning. It might take him a little while before he adjusts to the pro game, but he's come right in, and he was at all 18 training camp practices. He performed very well, and there was a time where he was given the opportunity to work with the top defense because of an injury to another player, and he took that opportunity and ran with it, and now he is just part of that top defense. So when they started camp, they had him on the second unit. Now he's on the first unit, and it looks like he's going to stay there for the foreseeable future.
Hey, Mike, Tom Kelly here. What impact will the ref strike have on this upcoming season?
Wow, John, that's a really good question. I was just reading up on some of that stuff. We're talking about the referees, right? They are making a lot of mistakes in some of these games, and I can tell Bill Belichick didn't say it, but I can tell from his actions that he's concerned. And after the first preseason game, he was asked about it, and he sort of let his feelings be known without really letting his feelings be known, if that makes sense, because he didn't want to get fined by the league. If a coach comes out and says, this is going to be a big issue, these guys are terrible, they can expect a fine from the league. But what Belichick said was, there's one person who knows more about officiating than anyone, and it's Mike Pereira, the former vice president of officiating, and so he would defer to his remarks. So then you go to Pereira's remarks, and it was, this is a big concern, it affects the integrity of the game. I find it hard to believe that the league would allow this to happen because they're talking about player safety being so important and just everything that goes into putting on, the NFL, a billion-dollar business, that they would let unqualified people regulate and officiate these games. I think is a huge story and a major mistake if they let it happen.
Mike, how are you? David Keefe. The Boston media has made a very big deal about the Patriots O-line. They've kind of pointed it as the one big perceived potential weakness in the team. Do you think that's a concern?
David, I do. I think it's a concern, but probably one that we haven't seen the best of the unit yet, so I think based on what we've seen, you'd have to be concerned, but I think they have some reinforcements coming back. We haven't seen Logan Mankins, their starting left guard, out on the field, and Sebastian Vollmer, their starting right tackle, looks like he's going to start practicing next week. So that, those two guys come back, I think all of a sudden the line gets better. But the one point that I make on this one is, I think we all remember Super Bowl 42 against the Giants. The Patriots were trying to finish off their undefeated season of 2007, and that offensive line had its worst day that day, and we saw what it did to their offense. They couldn't move it, and that's the only point I make. I say, look, I think they'll be good enough in the offensive line, but let's just not overlook it, because you can have all the weapons, you can have Tom Brady and all the receivers and record-breaking tight ends, but if you can't protect and you have a bad day at the worst moment, all that other stuff doesn't matter. So I think it's a fair concern to say, let's keep an eye on it, but ultimately I think they'll have the personnel to get the job done.
Hi, Mike. Alex Barth here. With Dane Fletcher going down in the preseason opener to the Saints, who do you think gets that extra roster spot? Is it a wide receiver, another linebacker? Does it go to Jeff Demps or somebody else?
Alex, it's hard to say like a one-for-one, but I would say the one name that comes to mind on this is his name is Jeff Tarpinian, and he is a linebacker. He's a second-year guy out of Iowa, and he made the team last year as a free agent. He wasn't drafted, and he played in 7 games. He had 1 start. And one of the things about Tarpinian is he's a special teams contributor, which Dane Fletcher was a big one, and he's also more of a coverage linebacker. So really, like for Dane Fletcher was going to be a backup linebacker. So really, you want to just make sure you have an extra layer of depth there by losing him. And my hunch is that Jeff Tarpinian, a player they liked last year, whose season ended with sort of a mysterious illness earlier than it was supposed to, he's back healthy again, and I think he would be the one player I would pinpoint that I would say would probably get the extra roster spot.
Now, Mike, Liam again. When you look at the receiver spot, obviously one of the biggest, I would say, unknowns about this Patriots team, who will get that final receiver spot between what seems to be Deion Branch and Dante Stallworth. Who do you see having the edge there?
This is a great one, Liam, and a tough one to call because Deion Branch, prior to this past week, hadn't done much in practice, which started to make me think maybe his days were numbered. But he got back out on the practice field and looked pretty good to me. So if I had to break down the receiver spot, this is how I would do it. I'd put Wes Welker, number 1, he's a lock. Brandon Lloyd, number 2, he's a lock. And then I'd go to the backside, and I'd say, okay, I think Julian Edelman's a lock because he's their top punt returner, and he also offers you some insurance in the slot receiver spot if you lose Welker next year. And I think Matthew Slater's also a lock because he's your special teams captain. So I have my top 2 spots on the depth chart in Welker and Lloyd, and I have my bottom 2 in Edelman and Slater because those are special teams guys. And then I need 2 spots in the middle between Deion Branch, Jabbar Gaffney, and Dante Stallworth. And if I had to pick 2 of those 3 to make it, right now I would lean toward Deion Branch and Jabbar Gaffney with Dante Stallworth sort of on the outside looking in. But one thing to keep in mind is that Gaffney did go out with an injury last week, so that could also alter the picture.
Hey, Mike, Alex Barth again. What's the status on Brian Waters right now? Does it look like he'll be back in time for the regular season? And if so, will he be able to contribute?
Well, the Waters thing remains a mystery, as I understand it. I mean, I'm sure the Patriots know, but they're just not willing to reveal that information. So basically it could be one of 3 things. He doesn't want to play this year because of a personal issue back home. And the second could be he wants more money, and again, this is all speculation. And the third could be that he just didn't want to go through camp, and he's going to show up, maybe this week, maybe next week, now that training camp is over. So who knows which one it is, but I would say if it's the last one, that he just didn't want to go through camp, based on last year, when he signed a week before the first game and played at a very high level, that would probably be a good indication that he could do that again if the Patriots were willing to accommodate him and say, look, it's okay that you miss camp, and let's go forward. We want you to be our starting right guard.
Hey, Mike, David Keefe again. You're obviously a multimedia journalist. You've been on television, you were on SportsCenter, you wrote for the Globe, I understand. You obviously write for ESPN Boston, which is an online media outlet. How do you think technology has changed the role of journalism today?
Well, everything goes so much faster than it did before. When I started, I used to write a story for the newspaper and it would come out the next day. Now, I can do an interview with a player and I can relay to, I guess you'd call them our consumers, what the player said minutes after it happened. So you don't have to wait for what we're reporting now, and that's probably the biggest change, the immediacy of it all. And that can be good, but it can also be bad. And I'll tell you a quick story. I've made mistakes because of the immediacy and the quickness of it. It's much like a player. Your fundamentals sometimes break down because you're rushing. So there was, I don't know if you remember the story, when Logan Mankins decided that he wouldn't report to Patriots training camp and he demanded a trade. That was a couple years ago. And I was reporting that story and I had all the facts and I was very excited that I had all the information and no one else did. And in my rush to put something out on Twitter, I dropped a very key word in my reporting on Twitter, and I said, Logan Mankins will sign his tender, but does not plan to report to camp. But what it should have said was Logan Mankins will not sign his tender and will not report to camp. And so really, I made a mistake because my fundamentals broke down because I was rushing, which in the old days, I wouldn't have had to rush because I would have had time to process the information, put it out for the next day's paper. So I think that's the one thing I would impress on anyone breaking into this business is, even though things are going so fast these days and it's rapid fire, work as hard as you can not to let your fundamentals break down. We still have to have the old school values of dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and making sure we have all our facts straight. There's a saying, better to be right than to be first. At first and wrong for that matter. So and I corrected it about a minute later, but you know what? It was too late, because once you put it out on Twitter, it's like sending an email that you're doing reply all. It's out there to the world, and you can't really get it back.
All right, thanks, Mike. All right, thank you for calling in, and we hope to talk to you some other time.
All right, thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too. All right, you guys. So we're gonna move on to our YBA fantasy draft. Obviously, we had some breaking news earlier, which we're gonna go to a press conference here from earlier today.